What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to the Fringe. I showed a Q&A session and a speech from Danielle Smith over the weekend from her recent trip to Calgary within her leaders dinner, where she took Q&A from a lot of people talking about Alberta Independence. One of the things she talked about in that speech was her plans to work with other provinces. Now, we've seen recently in the news Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew talking about opening up Hudson's Bay. We've talked about parts of the BC interior saying that they wish to tout the line of what a Western Republic of Canada could be. Now, should BC Interior, Alberta, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan group together? I've often said when we talk about independence within the country, of separating from Ottawa, there's multiple other provinces that have been talking about it. It appears that Saskatchewan is now leading the charge to join Alberta. In fact, a poll before the election said that there was a very high percentage, in fact, a higher percentage of people in Saskatchewan versus Alberta that were prepared to talk about independence should Mark Carney win the election. That number is growing. What you have to keep in mind about Saskatchewan is that their potash, their minerals, their oil and gas, their agriculture are all affected by Mark Carney. I think that when Alberta began this discussion of independence, that if you get other provinces on board that wish to claim their independence away from Ottawa, away from the federal government, you could potentially have a very profitable nation. So there are benefits to taking these other provinces. I've had viewers tell me, well, there's liberal voters in those provinces. Guys, there's liberal voters in every province. It doesn't matter whether they're small or larger. What we have to look at is what would benefit a nation moving forward. I want to first talk about Scott Moe, because Scott Moe is one that has alluded that, the same as Danielle Smith, he will support not stopping a vote should people require the amount of signatures necessary on independence. I know that there's think tanks trying to work within Saskatchewan. In fact, legions have shut down recently any kind of talk of grassroots independence. They don't want to have anything to do with it. I'm going to get into that a little later, but this goes back to what I was showing with Danielle's speech. Danielle had talked about how recently talks with British Columbia, talks with Alberta, talks with Saskatchewan, talks with Manitoba have all agreed that liquid natural gas needs to be a priority for Canada, that we need to talk about the development of liquid natural gas. We're no longer going to sit down and say, no more pipelines, no more anything, no more energy sector, green, green, green. They have found a way to work together. I think what's happening in the background as the Premier's meeting took place over the weekend is that there could be rumblings of what premiers would see. Now, again, they can't openly promote independence, but should their provinces vote and decide on independence, I think it poses a strong argument for a team up, so to speak, or a Western republic. Let's listen to what Scott Moe had to say a few weeks ago, because it's very telling as to what's happening with Saskatchewan. Let's take a listen.
I'm sure there's people that, yes, absolutely want to separate from Canada. I think you could narrow that down to largely being frustrated. I'm frustrated with the unconsulted decisions that have come from Ottawa for the last period of time. And should that change, I think you'd see those feelings of alienation wane.
Sure, I don't think that it's unreasonable to assume that within the coalition that represents the Saskatchewan Party that there would be some of those sentiments there. Within the electorate and within people that vote for the party. I suppose, how do you deal with that, and how do you speak to that as the government current?
Find a path forward with the new Prime Minister, of which we're attempting to do, of which I spoke to the other day. Now, a path forward, in fairness, does look like a change in direction of policies coming from the federal government, because the feelings of alienation, much of the opposition that you've heard from me in the last number of years has been not proactive, has been responsive to policies that have been introduced by the federal government, and I think that's the same with respect to the anger and frustration that many Saskatchewan folks are feeling, and it's not just in Saskatchewan; it's in many other areas of Canada as well. And So it's incumbent on us to chart a path forward that is in, I say, the best interests of Saskatchewan residents, but also certainly the best interests of our province within the Confederation.
So he talks about the best interests of the provinces within the Confederation. This face tells you exactly what he knows, what those in Saskatchewan are thinking. Again, their polls showed they were more supportive of independence than Alberta was going into the federal election, should the Carney Liberals win. Now, since this press conference, there have been many statements from Scott Moe that, again, he will support a citizen-led petition should those votes decide that people have had enough. The difference with Saskatchewan over Alberta is that the rural vote seems to hold a lot of weight when it comes to seeking independence. Saskatchewan has more rural voters than municipal, I believe. I've been told they do, at least in terms of voter turnout. You have potash, you have minerals, you have agriculture, you have oil and gas, and people have had enough. And we've seen from Mark Carney that there is no intention to move forward with a pipeline, that he's just left it up in the air, that he said, oh, well, we're just going to let people decide. If everybody's on board, like Quebec, well, we're going to go through with a pipeline. Quebec's already dissolved the monarchy. Quebec is moving forward with their own terms and conditions that don't bode well for Canada. Mark Carney has done more destruction than Justin Trudeau as a result of Justin Trudeau and his failed policies over the last decade in the last 6 weeks than he realizes. You have a complete country in disarray with multiple provinces now weighing in on independence. You have a budget due in the fall that is going to upset the rest of the nation because there is no way for them to mask that budget. They talked about reduced spending when in fact they're spending more than ever before. Mark Carney, of course, reported on by the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, said that within his 4-year first term, we're looking at a rough $300 billion deficit. Yet he talks about reduced spending. Trump's tariffs are now talking the game again. Mix that in with lost jobs, mass inflation, layoffs, people unable to afford food, people still not able to afford anything, and a prime minister who wants to tout an industrial carbon tax that gets passed on to people as food costs rise, as their clothing costs rise, as their utilities rise. There's no unity within this country. The elbows up Team Canada has failed. This is the new Team Canada, or at least Team Western Republic. What's funny is, and the reason that this is going to blow up in their faces, and this is how you know they're winning. The opposition, the NDP, introduced an anti-separation bill, an anti-independence bill. Because if they were certain that a vote would fail, if they actually left it up to the people, this tells you that they are very scared, and they know more about the numbers than we do, folks, about what that means to give that to the public. The government never wants to give up any power. These bureaucrats, these pigs at a trough, do not want to be told they could be out of a job. So they'll do everything in their power to use their laws that we've given them to ensure that we, the people, are silenced. Bill would double the number of signatures needed for citizen plebiscite on separation. I love that they're still using that word. But this is a CBC article after all. Saskatchewan's opposition NDP introduced a bill Wednesday. Again, this article was written back on May 7th. That would increase the threshold for citizen petitions on separation referendums and create a legal barrier to prevent the Premier and Cabinet from unilaterally calling such a referendum. So you're not allowed to allow people to exercise their rights anymore. We're just going to change the rules. Now, again, if they thought that this was far out of reach, that it was out of the realm of possibility, why would they go to such lengths to shut people down? The same reasons that the Emergency Act was put in place against trucker protesters. It was working. This is about not leaving things to chance and about showing some leadership in that respect. NDP Energy and Resources critic Sally Hauser said, you see Danielle Smith in Alberta trying to make separation easier. We want to make it harder. The bill called the Keep Saskatchewan in Canada Act would amend Saskatchewan's Referendum and Plebiscite Act to explicitly exclude separation referendums from the list of referendums that the Premier or Legislative Assembly would legally be allowed to call. Well, again, if you're so confident that people in Saskatchewan are happy with their government, why would you try to block such a thing? Why would you try to shut it down? It also would raise the threshold for successful citizen petitions on separation referendums, requiring signatures from 30% of eligible voters instead of 15%. Currently, the separation petition by citizen groups Unified Grassroots has generated roughly 3,000 signatures. Now, again, this was on the 7th. To meet the 15% threshold, that would need to accumulate roughly 125,000 signatures. How hard do you think it's going to be for Saskatchewan to get 125,000 signatures? Especially with more information. And again, put this into thought when you think about the fall. When you think about a summer of turmoil with costs rising, Mark Carney's disastrous budget, again, he hasn't even acknowledged that half of his country is in disarray. What do you think that's going to do to these people in Saskatchewan when it affects their bottom line? Because that's essentially what this is all about. It's not about a flag. It's not about passports. It's not about pension. This is about people's bottom lines. If people can't run their businesses, if they can't earn a living, if they can't pay their bills, if they can't keep the lights on, if they can't put clothes on their children's backs, they're going to say, this is a government that doesn't care about us. We have no choice. We have to move on. Premier Scott Moe, who described the amendment as the Silence Saskatchewan People Bill during question period that Wednesday, accused the NDP of being responsible for keeping separatist threats at the top of the political agenda. Of course it would. It would just fuel the fire even further. The party that wants everyone to stop talking about separation certainly can't stop talking about separation, he said, before reiterating the right of citizens to launch plebiscites under the current legislation. I will never vote to separate from this province, NDP leader Clara Beck said, but I am not sure that the Premier can say the same on his team. So the whole reason that they're saying this is that, we wouldn't do it, so that means everybody shouldn't. Scott Moe has given his people the ability to speak, and he's said to his constituents the same thing Danielle Smith has said, that, look, my job as Premier is to find a way to work within the country. However, we're not going to shut down the right for people to have a voice. That's all that this is. And the outrage is astronomically overwhelming for those on the left to be outraged and upset that people would dare want to question their government moving forward, when what the big question should be asked at this point is, are we doing enough as government if people are this upset, if they're this frustrated, as Scott Moe says? Their job, after all, is to find a solution to temper people's frustrations rather than shut down their ability to display their frustrations. Huge difference. I think if you ask me, this confirms that Saskatchewan has entered the fold, that they are joining Alberta in talks with independence, that I believe it has a very strong candidate, if not stronger than Alberta, to move forward on the independence front. And it could mean positive things if Alberta were to gain its steam over the summer, if we were to see votes go through, if other provinces like Manitoba want to talk about access to Hudson's Bay, if you want to talk about the interior of BC, think for a minute. If we were to pen those resources together as a Western Republic and separate from Ottawa, anybody who's struggling right now to pay their bills, anybody who's struggling to get ahead in any of those provinces, how do you think that would bode for the rest of us if we were able to do that? Now, hypothetically, I, for one, could say, boy, that would be a great life for everybody. No federal taxes, no transfer payments, better jobs, better pay. When it comes down to it, and this is where I'm saying, you take the politics out of it. Is it really that hard of a decision to make? I know for me it's not, but I'm not here to convince you. I'm here to ask, what do you think? Let me know down below in the comments. Do you think Saskatchewan has successfully joined the foray at this point? Do you think maybe there's talks going on with other premiers that should these votes be led by our citizens, should they go through, what is the next step? What are we going to do? How do we work together Let me know your thoughts down below. If it's your first time here, I hope this video has earned your subscription. Make sure as you hit that button, you click the bell for all notifications. Join me live here on the channel each and every Friday night for Friday Night Fringe, our live streaming show, as I'm joined by the very beautiful Mrs. Fringe as we go back and forth throughout the YouTube community talking about everything that happened this week in politics, everything we know that's coming up in the week ahead, as well as your Q&A and hearing what you guys have to say. I look forward to hearing what you have to say each and every Friday night, but I most importantly look forward to hearing what you're going to say this Friday night, starting at 6 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Central, here on the channel. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you have a great rest of your day. I'll catch you on the next one.